My girlfriend said, I lied about my past. So what? I said, you're right. Then I hired a PI, found the truth, then moved out, without a word. 3 days later, she admitted for a breakdown. I, 29M, never thought I'd be writing this, but here we are. 3 months ago, I was planning to propose to my girlfriend of 2 years. Today, I'm sitting in a new apartment, watching her spiral into what can only be described as a complete meltdown. Let me explain how we got here. It started with something small, as these things usually do. We were at her friend's birthday party when someone mentioned how they met their partner through a mutual friend from college. My girlfriend laughed and said she'd never dated anyone from her college, claimed she was too focused on studies. I found it odd because she'd mentioned a college boyfriend before, someone named Jake who she said taught her to play guitar. When I brought it up later that night, she brushed it off. She said she misspoke at the party, that Jake was just a friend who happened to play guitar. Fair enough, I thought. People mix up details all the time. But then it happened again and again. Small inconsistencies that individually meant nothing, but together painted a picture of someone who couldn't keep her story straight. She'd mentioned working at a coffee shop during college, then later claimed she'd never had a job during school. She said her parents divorced when she was 12, then casually mentioned them celebrating their anniversary last year. I started paying closer attention. Not in a creepy way. I'm not that guy, but I noticed how she'd change details depending on who she was talking to. With my friends, she was the studious type who never partied. With hers, she was the wild child who barely made it through finals. The breaking point came 6 weeks ago. We were looking through old photos on her laptop when I saw a folder labeled College Memories. Inside were dozens of photos of parties, trips, and yes, multiple guys who were clearly more than friends. There was Jake with the guitar, but also Marcus from what looked like a formal dance, and David from some beach trip where they were definitely acting like a couple. I didn't say anything immediately. Instead, I asked her about the photos casually over dinner. She looked me straight in the eye and told me those were just friends, that she'd never been serious with anyone before me. The confidence in her voice, the way she didn't even hesitate, it was unsettling. That's when I decided to test her. I started asking more specific questions about her past, creating opportunities for her to come clean. Each time, she doubled down on her lies. When I mentioned seeing her with someone who looked like a boyfriend in the photos, she laughed and said I was being paranoid. The final straw came 3 weeks ago during a dinner with her college roommate, who was visiting. The roommate started talking about how crazy it was that my girlfriend had dated 3 guys seriously during college, including one engagement that lasted almost a year. My girlfriend went pale and quickly changed the subject, but the damage was done. That night, I confronted her directly. I told her I knew she'd been lying about her past relationships. I expected her to break down, to apologize, to explain why she felt the need to lie. Instead, she looked at me with complete indifference and said those words that still echo in my head. I lied about my past. So what? She continued, explaining that everyone lies about their past to some degree. That what mattered was our relationship now, not who she'd been with before. She seemed genuinely confused about why I was upset, as if lying to your partner for 2 years was the most natural thing in the world. I stared at her for a long moment, processing what she'd just said. Then I nodded and told her she was absolutely right. The confusion on her face was almost comical. She'd expected a fight, maybe tears, definitely drama. Instead, I just agreed with her and went to bed. But I wasn't done. Not even close. The next morning, I hired a private investigator. I know how that sounds. Paranoid, controlling, maybe even creepy. But something about her casual dismissal of lying made me realize I didn't know who I'd been living with for 2 years. If she could lie so easily about something as basic as her dating history, what else was she hiding? I told the PI I needed a comprehensive background check. Not just criminal records, but employment history, educational records, previous addresses, and yes, relationship history. I wanted to know who my girlfriend really was beneath all the carefully constructed stories. While I waited for results, I acted completely normal. I went to work, came home, had dinner with her, watched Netflix, went through all the motions of our relationship. She seemed relieved that I'd gotten over her revelation about lying. She even made a few jokes about it, as if my hurt feelings had been an overreaction she'd successfully navigated. The PI's report arrived exactly 1 week later, and it was worse than I'd imagined. Not only had she lied about her relationship history, but she'd fabricated significant portions of her entire identity. The coffee shop job? She'd actually worked at a high-end restaurant and had been fired for stealing from the till. Her parents' divorce? They were still happily married, living 2 hours away, not across the country like she'd claimed. But the relationships were the real shocker. Jake wasn't just a college boyfriend. They'd lived together for 3 years and had only broken up 8 months before she and I started dating. Marcus was a 2-year relationship that ended when she cheated on him. David was actually her fiancé for 6 months during senior year, a relationship that ended when he discovered she'd been maintaining profiles on dating apps throughout their engagement. The pattern was clear. She was a serial liar who created elaborate fictional versions of herself for each new relationship. According to the PI's interviews with her exes, I wasn't experiencing anything unique. She'd told Jake she'd never had a serious boyfriend before him. She'd told Marcus she was a virgin when they met. She'd told David she'd only had one previous relationship. But the most disturbing discovery was recent. The PI had found evidence that she was currently active on dating apps, the same ones she'd used while engaged to David. Photos from our apartment, taken while I was at work. Messages with multiple guys, including plans to meet up that she'd scheduled during my business trips. I sat in my car after work for 2 hours, reading through the evidence. Photos, bank records, interview transcripts, dating app screenshots, it was all there. The woman I'd been planning to propose to was not only a compulsive liar, but an active cheater who had never stopped looking for her next victim. That night, I made my decision. I wasn't going to confront her again, wasn't going to give her another opportunity to manipulate me with tears or anger or indifference. Instead, I was going to disappear from her life as completely as she disappeared from mine through her lies. I spent the weekend moving my belongings out while she was at her sister's house. I'd been paying most of the rent anyway, so I arranged with the landlord to have my name removed from the lease. I forwarded my mail to my new address, changed my passwords on everything, and transferred my half of our joint savings account into my own name, which was perfectly legal since it was my money that had funded it anyway. By Sunday night, I was completely moved out. I left no note, no explanation, nothing. I simply vanished from her life the same way honesty had vanished from ours. I blocked her on social media, but didn't block her phone number. I wanted to see how she'd react, what story she'd create to explain my disappearance. Update 1. The first call came Monday morning at 6 a.m. She was panicked, asking where I was, if I was okay, why I hadn't come home. I didn't answer. The voicemail started an hour later, first confused, then angry, then pleading. She'd come home Sunday night to find the apartment half empty and no sign of me. By Tuesday, the calls had become frantic. She'd figured out I'd moved out deliberately, but she couldn't understand why. In her mind, we'd resolved our little disagreement about her lying. She kept leaving messages asking what she'd done wrong, promising we could work through whatever was bothering me. The irony was thick. After 2 years of lies, she genuinely couldn't figure out what the problem was. Wednesday brought a different tone. Anger crept into her messages. She accused me of being childish, of overreacting to something minor. She reminded me that everyone lies sometimes, that I was being unreasonable. She even suggested I was probably lying about things too, a classic deflection technique I'd seen her use before. Update 2. By Thursday, something had shifted. Her sister called me, a number I hadn't blocked because I'd never given it to my girlfriend. She was worried because my girlfriend hadn't shown up for work in 2 days and wasn't answering calls from family or friends. Her sister asked if we'd had a fight, if I knew where she was. I told her simply that our relationship was over and she should check my girlfriend's apartment. I didn't elaborate, didn't explain about the lies or the cheating or any of it. I just suggested they do a wellness check if they were worried. Friday morning, her best friend texted me from a number I didn't recognize. Apparently, my girlfriend had been found in her apartment, not eating, not sleeping, alternating between rage and complete despair. She'd been calling in sick to work, ignoring her friends, and spending her time trying to figure out what had happened to me. The friend asked if I could at least talk to her, just to provide some closure. She said my girlfriend was falling apart and couldn't understand why I'd disappeared without warning. I didn't respond. Update 3. Saturday brought the breakthrough I'd been waiting for. At 3 a.m., my phone rang with a call from her number. This time, I answered. She was sobbing, barely coherent, admitting that she'd lied about more than just her past relationships. Through her tears, she confessed to the dating apps, to meeting up with other guys during my business trips, to fabricating stories about her family and her work history. She said she'd been planning to tell me everything, that she'd just been scared of losing me. I listened to her complete breakdown without saying a word. When she finished, when she'd laid out every lie and betrayal, I finally spoke. I told her I already knew everything. About Jake and Marcus and David. About the dating apps and the cheating and the stolen money from her job. About her parents who weren't actually divorced and living across the country. I told her about the private investigator, about the evidence I'd collected, about how I'd planned my exit while she was lying to my face every single day. The silence that followed was deafening. Then came a sound I'd never heard from her before, genuine, raw, uncontrolled sobbing. Not the tears she'd used to manipulate me in the past, but the sound of someone realizing their entire world had collapsed. She asked why I hadn't just confronted her, why I'd disappeared without giving her a chance to explain. I reminded her of her exact words 3 weeks ago. I lied about my past. So what? I told her she was right. She had lied. And so what? So I'd acted accordingly. She tried to apologize then, promised she could change, begged for another chance. But I'd heard these words before in the PI's interviews with her exes. The same promises, the same tears, the same manipulation tactics she'd used on every man she'd betrayed. I told her our conversation was over, that I wouldn't be answering her calls anymore, and that she should focus on getting professional help for her compulsive lying. Then I hung up and blocked her number. Final update. It's been 3 weeks since that final phone call, and the silence has been refreshing. Through mutual friends, I've heard she took medical leave from work and is seeing a therapist. Part of me hopes she actually gets the help she needs, though I suspect she's probably just crafting new lies to tell her therapist. Her sister reached out once more, asking if I'd consider talking to her because she was having a complete breakdown. I declined politely but firmly. Her breakdown isn't my responsibility. It's the natural consequence of building a life on lies. I've learned something important through all this. Sometimes the most powerful response to betrayal isn't anger or confrontation. Sometimes it's simply removing yourself completely from someone's life, letting them face the consequences of their actions without you there to soften the blow. She spent 2 years lying to me, cheating on me, and manipulating me. When I discovered the truth, she dismissed my hurt feelings with casual indifference. She made it clear that my emotional well-being meant nothing to her, that she felt entitled to deceive me without consequence. So I gave her exactly what she asked for, a relationship where lies didn't matter. By removing myself entirely, I showed her what a relationship built on deception actually looks like: empty, hollow, and ultimately unsustainable. Do I feel guilty about her breakdown? Honestly, no. She didn't have a breakdown because I left. She had a breakdown because she finally had to face the reality of who she'd become. For 2 years, she'd been living a double life, and when that life collapsed, she couldn't handle seeing herself clearly for the first time. I'm not vindictive or cruel, but I also don't owe sympathy to someone who showed me none. She made her choices every single day for 2 years. Every lie, every dating app message, every secret meeting. Those were conscious decisions to betray not just me, but every version of herself she'd presented to me. The most poetic justice? She'd always told me she hated drama, that she preferred straightforward, honest communication. In the end, I gave her exactly that, the most honest communication possible. I showed her through my actions that lies have consequences, that betrayal ends relationships, and that some behavior is simply unforgivable. I'm doing well now. Dating again, slowly, with a much better understanding of red flags and the importance of trusting my instincts. When someone shows you who they are, whether through words or actions, believe them the first time. As for her, I genuinely hope she finds peace and learns to build authentic relationships. But that's her journey to take, and I won't be part of it. Some bridges, once burned, should stay that way. Sometimes the best revenge isn't elaborate schemes or public humiliation. It's simply refusing to participate in someone's dysfunction anymore. It's choosing your own peace over their chaos, your own truth over their lies. She asked so what about her lying. I showed her exactly what.